Hey, it's Dr. Amanda with Straightsmile Solutions, straightsmilesolutions.com, yet another canine impaction video. However, again, my disclaimer, at Straightsmile Solutions, we do help doctors learn to do amazing orthodontics, especially primary care doctors, pediatric dentists, general dentists. I've had periodontists, I've had prosthodontists. I pretty much had every dental specialist is doing orthodontics now. Everyone's doing it because it's not that hard, especially when you learn to diagnose and treatment plan correctly. And it's really fun. And a lot of times patients don't want to go to the orthodontist because the orthodontist is either sloppy, not doing things right, pulling teeth, or hoarding their cases for comprehensive or phase two. So all the stuff the orthodontists have been doing all these decades is now blowing up in their faces. And yes, I am an orthodontist. But I'm one of the ones that I call myself an analog orthodontist because I was trained in the analog world, but now I'm fully in the digital world. So I see it from both ways. I was also trained in the heyday of orthodontics when we were making just cash money with the referrals because no one was taking anything in-house, and now it's different. So after seeing so many botched cases, I got frustrated and I started making videos, and now I try to make one a day, just so people around the world can have access to great orthodontic education. My channel is meant for dentists, and I have dentists all over the world that really appreciate learning from somebody who is really straightforward and doesn't lie. So anyways, let's talk a little bit about canine exposure surgeries, different types. No, I'm not a periodontist. So if you want to know more, talk to a periodontist. I send the patients for referral. We talk about what type of surgery they're going to do. We talk about how we're going to set up the case. We talk about when the timing is, and then they decide what type of surgery they're going to get. I don't decide. So obviously, if it's an open or a closed, I need to know that because it depends on how I'm going to prepare them and what I'm going to do after and when I need to see them and what the post-op is going to look like. So it's something you do need to know, and you need to know the difference. I usually have an idea of what it's going to be depending on the position once we get there. And just a friendly reminder, you're not worrying about the canines surgery if this is a phase one interceptive case. All you're doing for phase one interceptive is getting the bite correct. You're getting the transverse correct. You're getting rid of the shifts. You're getting rid of the habits. You're fixing the airway issues, which may or may not involve working with ENT and myo. And no, if you need ENT and myo, you can't do it in ortho. It's not necessarily going to fix everything. It might, but it might not. So do everything right before you take the case, because if you start the case, you better finish the case or you're giving a refund. Lots of content on that. Of course, see my phase one interceptive playlist, or you can take our phase one course, which is available at straightsmilesolutions.com, or you can work with us one-on-one on a case. So again, open versus closed. Let's say this is a phase two case or a comprehensive case. If you have a canine that's not erupted, you better make sure it's going to come through. And if you're not sure it's going to come through on its own, then you think it might need a surgery, then I would refer it to ortho, because I'm not going to help you with a surgery case. That's my boundaries for Straightsmile Solutions. We take simple, easy, predictable cases. And ideally, we try to do as much as possible bite issues in phase one interceptive. If the patient is already botched and they're done growing or almost done growing, well, better you send them to an orthodontist because they know what to do, and hopefully they're not pulling teeth. Unless it's absolutely required, and sometimes it is. So I'm not saying pulling teeth is always a bad thing. Sometimes it is the only option. You know, we ran out of other options. The parents waited too long. The parents refused to do phase one interceptive. Ortho dropped the ball and didn't do phase one interceptive. It's very sad when these things happen. So open versus closed. Basically, open means that it's superficial or not enough, either on the palatal or on the labial, that no need to suture. I mean, the tooth maybe hasn't come through, it's still under the gum, but if it's only under the attached tissue, okay, if it's under the, buccal mucosa, under the unattached tissue, well, then they're probably not going to do open. They're going to try to have it emerge through the attached tissue. But if it's in the, let's say, for example, I don't have a great picture. So, okay, let's say, for example, this tooth. I'm just giving an example because this was the best pano I could find that had a great example. This tooth, relatively vertical, right? Based on the photo, I mean, this patient could be an adult, but I mean, let's just say, for example, this patient is 13, 14. I'm just saying, I don't know who this patient is. This is a stock image. But let's say we got this. This tooth should have come down on its own. If this apex was still open, hypothetically speaking, and it was just being blocked by this, well, then first thing I would do is make space, whether we're doing expansion, whether we're doing align level and open coil springs. I don't know what we're doing because I don't have all the records, but that would be the first thing I could do. If I create space and this sucker is out of the interference, where it's stuck under the contour there, and it starts coming down, well, great. We did it. Woo, good job. But if I create space and it doesn't have the momentum to come down, then we got to start thinking about a surgery. But before I think about the surgery, I need to make sure that I got to make sure it's viable, and I got to make sure that it's not ankylosed. So these are all things you can check with your 3D beam readers, whatever, to read. Of course, it's never 100%, but at least you have an idea. Back in the analog days, we didn't have that option, so we just had to pray, wait, monitor with panos, and patients got mad all the time, and sometimes they failed, right? So let's say this was buccal. I can't tell if it's buccal or palatal from this, but usually if it's this low, it's buccal. But if it's buccal, you're gonna be able to see it, right? So you're gonna see a bump under the lip. It's like this, except for this would be covered by the gum. Let's say it was buccal and it was covered by just the attached gingiva. Let's say it was like this, but there was just like a big mound. You've seen these before where there's like a lump. That would be a great one for an open surgery. Why would you do close and suture it back? I don't think you could even get the suture to go over. All you do is just create a little window, a little trough, put a little perio pack on it, whatever they do, and once it heals, the orthodontist plops a bracket on it. So easy, right? Now, a closed surgery is where it's in the bone and they have to create a trough of bone. They're probably not going to keep that open because the bone is going to get infected big time and you could get necrosis and stuff. So they're going to put a bracket with a chain on it, suture it back up over and there's going to be a tiny little chain just protruding from a little golden chain. Very beautiful. That's a closed. So most surgeries are closed. Occasionally you have an open one. I would say most open ones are generally buccal. I have seen some open palatals. Only time I see an open is when there's like an obvious lump, like a bulge, either here or here. And it's always very low, Like sometimes I just tell the patients, especially if it's on the buccal, you can literally just brush that tooth and it might just break through on its own. Just keep brushing it with a baby toothbrush. Brush the gum, brush the lump. I know it's sore, brush it. Because that's what we do even with little kids. If they have a tooth that isn't coming through, we just tell them just to brush it, or eat on it, and it usually busts through. Of course, if the apex is still open, it's more likely to do that than if the apex is closed. So basically that is open versus closed surgery explained. You don't get to decide, the patient doesn't get to decide, the periodontist or the oral surgeon decides. I would say periodontists are more likely to do open than an oral surgeon. But of course, the risk for infection is a little bit higher if you do that and it needs to be monitored. I usually will see them back in about 10 days after the perio pack is removed. After the periodontist tells me in writing, I can go ahead and get started moving the tooth, and then I'll go ahead and move it. So hopefully this helps. All right, and watch all my other content on canine exposure surgeries. Of course, if it was open, you might be able to do something like Invisalign. You might not need to do braces and piggyback wires and all that. So it's always good to know, before you get started, what they think this is going to be. You could always get started with Invisalign, and worst comes to worst, you have to switch to braces. However, if you're a general or pediatric dentist, unless you've got your braces game up and running, that could mean you're giving a refund. So carefully pick your cases. All right, thanks so much.